Levántense, por favor. Piedra, papel, tijeras.
Because we have brain breaks, I see connection between students. I see understanding of another language and of another culture. And I see a return of the focus to be continued throughout the rest of the class. Students' brains are working very, very hard when they're listening to another language and reading another language, and it can be mentally exhausting for them. I might start seeing them look sleepy or lose their eye contact. And so when I do a brain break, it grabs their attention, it gets them excited, it allows them to interact with their classmates. When they come back to the lesson, I have their eye contact again, I have their attention again, they're energized, they're ready to continue learning. I heard about this brain break as heads or tails, but then I happen to have a Mexican peso. On one side, there's the Aztec sun calendar, and on the other side is the eagle. So instead of heads or tails, I called it eagle or sun.
Águila o sol. 3, 2, 1, 0.
Students put their hands on their hips if they're guessing that it will land on eagle, and they put their hands on their heads if they think it's going to land on the sun.
Es sol.
Then if they win, they remain standing. If they lose, they take a seat, and we keep narrowing it down until there's one winner.
Games like that have motions attached to them, and those definitely help the vocabulary stick in our brain better.
We know that movement helps with learning too. A lot of times when the students are moving, they remember words better. Another brain break is arriba, abajo, mira, up, down, look.
Up en español. Arriba. Down en español. Abajo. Look. Mira, levántense, formen un círculo.
I say arriba, which means up, and the kids look up. And then I say abajo, which means down, and they look down at the floor. And then I say mira, which means look. They have to look at another person in the circle straight in the eyes. And if the person is looking back at them, they're both out. And we narrow it down until there's 1 or 2 people left. I think that one is super special because oftentimes you're looking at a student that may not run in the same social circles, but you're looking at them in the eye and you're acknowledging them as another human being and a classmate.
Finally, Kara ganaron. Excellent.
One of the great things about brain breaks is that eventually the students want to lead the brain breaks, and so they take over the teacher role, which is really fun for them, and it's also fun for me to watch.
Morgan es la profesora.
With más alto, más bajo, higher or lower, I would have one student sitting in kind of a special chair and flip over the top card. The first person in line looks at the card and then they guess if they think the next card is going to be higher or lower than that card.
Más bajo?
Sí, más alto.
And if they're right, they continue walking in the circle and come back around, stay in the game. But if they're not right, they take a seat and they continue guessing and walking around the circle until there's only one person left.
Sid ganó. Aplauso para Sid. Gracias, Morgan. Muy bien.
Another brain break is pasa la bola, pass the ball. One person leaves the classroom and doesn't know who has the ball.
Que Harry escuchó.
So they come in, and then the other students form a circle around that one person, and the person has to address people in the circle and ask in Spanish, do you have it?
No la tengo. ¿Tú la tienes?
No la tengo.
¿Tú la tienes?
No la tengo.
Meanwhile, they're also passing the ball behind their backs around the circle to try to avoid having the ball in their hands when they're asked the question. It keeps going until the person in the middle discovers who has the ball.
Sí. Aplauso para Harry.
Doing these brain breaks can help people relax, feel more calm. If I'm having a bad day and then we do a brain break, I usually automatically feel better. It gets my head in the right space to learn.
I try to do 3 or 4 brain breaks in a 90-minute class. So every 15 to 20 minutes we're getting up. Sometimes the brain breaks are 30 seconds, sometimes they might be 2 minutes, but all the time that I am investing in the brain breaks comes back to reward me in the end because I have the students' attention and happiness.
Vamos. Me gusta la positividad. Ok, otra vez.